Hey guys, so in this video I'm going to be going over how to use the Digitakt as a subtractive synthesizer. So the Digitakt is a sampling groovebox, so the typical application would be to load it with a bunch of one-shot samples and use it as sort of a drum machine with samples. But it's also a pretty nice little subtractive synth in disguise. So first, let's go over a bit of theory so that we understand what's going on here for those of you who are new to synthesis maybe. Typically, a synthesizer, a traditional subtractive synthesizer, you would start with an oscillator, or in an analog sense, we call these VCOs or voltage-controlled oscillators. That's what produces the sound. And then you would typically run that through a filter, and normally it's a voltage-controlled low-pass filter, and that removes some harmonics to help you sculpt the sound. And then you would run through an amplifier or a voltage-controlled amplifier, which allows you to change the volume of the sound. And these are just tools to allow you to sculpt and emulate all kinds of different sounds. And then to help shape these sounds and morph these parameters over time, you would use control devices like envelope generators and LFOs, which just assist you in being able to control things like the filter and the amplitude or the volume of the sound over time to create something interesting. Well, the Digitakt actually has all of these building blocks built in. The only difference here is that instead of a voltage-controlled oscillator, you can use samples as your audio source. So you effectively keep all the subtractive building blocks, but you replace the oscillator with a sample. Okay, so as you can see here, I have a basic project set up, and I've entered in the sampling menu. And I have this other microphone here, which is hooked up to the Digitakt through a mixer. And you can see the levels up here. So now if I press yes, it's going to start recording. So I'm just going to sing a static note of some kind with my mouth, and then we're going to sculpt the sound and see what we can come up with. And as you can see, we got a waveform here, and now I can chop it up by moving the start point. And I'm going to close down the end point here. And that's it. I'm just going to confirm that. Pick the default name, and now it's asking me if I want to assign to one of the tracks. So I'm going to put it in track 5 here. I'm going to save that. Get rid of that. So that one had a little more harmonics in it. And let's record the final one now. I'm just going to clear this, go back to the front page, and we're done. So we have our 4 samples here. And now the fun part. So let's start sculpting the sound. So if you remember all the parameters I described, you have the filter here, which you can choose between low pass and high pass. And you also have an envelope dedicated to the filter, which you can adjust with this envelope amount here. And then you have your basic VCA here. So you have an ADSR envelope tied to the VCA directly. And you have an LFO page. So you have a single LFO, which you can assign to a bunch of different parameters. And then up here you have tuning, bit reduction, and kind of sample controls of when it starts and stops. So let's start with this one here. We can close the filter. And then we're going to keep this one percussive, and we can add a bit of ADSR modulation, which you can control with this knob here. You have positive and negative amounts of the contribution to the dedicated ADSR to that filter. And then we can have the envelope match that as well. So you can create more like plucky percussive. And you can increase the reverb. So I'm going to keep that one as more of a percussive type sound. Let's move on to the next one. This one I'm going to turn in more into a pad. So if I go to my amp envelope, I can increase the attack, increase the release time as well. And same thing for the filter. I'm going to keep it low pass, close it down a little bit, and then create a pad-like sound here with increased release and attack, and then increase the contribution. Let's increase the cutoff a little bit. And now the trick is that even though I have a long release, the sample itself is not long enough. So you see the sound cut off. So the way to get around that is to have it loop. So what's cool about the Digitakt is you can have it start at some point and then start looping at a separate segment of the sample. So you can extend it to be infinite effectively. And you can control that with the start length and loop points. And the main thing you need to change is the mode here. Right now it's just playing once when you trigger it. But if you set it to forward loop, it'll play and then it'll keep looping. And the source menu here has a second version of the screen. So if you press it again, you can get this graphical view, which makes it more easy to see and visualize what is happening in terms of the loop. So for example, you can change the start point. I'm going to leave the start point at the beginning. And then you can change effectively your loop point and the length. So as you can see, it starts from the start here and then it loops into in this region here, which is the loop region. And you can adjust that independently. And now you can see that our release time is actually being heard now. So now you can lower the release here so it's not so aggressive. And again, we can increase the reverb, add a bit of delay. Right, that's too much delay. And of course, you can play it chromatically as well. So you can enter chromatic menu by hitting function and pressing track here. And now you can play the sound melodically. And I also have a MIDI controller connected, so I can use that as well. And by default, each track number corresponds to the MIDI channel. So on the Arturia key step, I can just hold shift and pick a channel here. So if I want to control the 6th track, I can do shift 6, and then I can control that sound. Move on to our next sound. I pick a high-pass filter for this one to keep it interesting. Bit of overdrive, reverb. And finally the last track. Can also pitch it down. And that's it. So we have our nice little 4 tracks here. So let's attempt to make a little